Hello, and welcome back to Live Now with Veenu and Chuck. We are your host, Veenu Keller, my amazing co-host, Chuck Hogan, and we want to welcome you to Spanglish World Network and her network on Zingo TV's channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download both the Zingo TV app on the respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. The Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire Sticks, Roku Sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. So here we are again, Chuck, to discuss an amazing topic that we call it fake it, face it, or faith it until you make it.
That's it. That is it. And thank you so much, Veenu. You know, we so often get stuck in trying to figure out this whole ideology, and this comes up a lot right now, of imposter syndrome. And, you know, with your background in child behavior, relationship cultivation, and overall family strategizing, I was like, okay, who better to have this discussion with than my sister from another mister? Because when kids are little, there's this thing, and we go, do we blame people when they're just small humans? And we say, oh, you're faking it till you make it. Learning how to walk. What's this crawling thing? Are you faking it? You know, and I started thinking about this going, wow, when something's new, aren't we all crawling? Aren't we all starting off where it's fresh and new? And where does someone get off criticizing and go, oh, they're just faking it till they make it? They, you know, it's not happening for them. And so they just continue to just copy someone else. And I'm curious what you think of this, because it's like going, when does it become faking it by comparison to faithing it?
Right.
You know, or facing it. In fact, that's probably the next step, right? Because it's like when a kid's learning to crawl or walk, aren't they facing it? It's like, ooh, the prospect, the opportunity. What would you say to someone if they go, oh, they're just faking it?
So I look at it kind of how you do, for the fact that, you know, we talked many shows ago about the stages of competency, right? And
Yes.
when we're in conscious incompetence, where we know what we don't know, like we just know, you know, throw me in a chemistry class and I'm going to tell you all I know is H2O. That's about it in chemistry. That's all I know. That's all I remember. So I am very clear about what I don't know.
Hmm.
And there's another aspect of fake it to make it is I looked at it as role model. Like, who's my role model? Who can I emulate to get through it? So, again, using that as an example, I would probably sit down next to somebody who gets it, right? And I'm going to start doing what they're doing. Am I watching them read? Am I watching them take notes and emulate what they're doing? So, one might think that I'm faking it because I have no clue what I'm doing. Or am I emulating what someone who has unconscious competence about the subject or the problem or the challenge or whatever it is in life? You know,
Sure.
think about like when we're babies, like we just use that example. It's first we go to the curiosity stage, right? Like, okay, what are these big
Yes.
people doing that are on these two things and they're just walking around, and why am I just laying here on the floor, can't move? You know,
Right.
and so we're curious. Then all of a
Yes.
sudden we realize, like, hey, if I get up on these four things, I got some more movement. Like, I can rock, I could see things differently. But yet all these other people have these two big things that they're walking on, and what is it? And then all of a sudden we
Ex-
realize, as soon as maybe someone stands us up, hey, it's a different view up here, right? In our little 1 foot self, right? It's a different view up here.
exactly.
And we start to model what we see, and we start to learn that, hey, we need some aid. So we get onto a couch or a coffee table, and we start to put movement into those feet, and we're still faking it. Like, we're still very clear about what we don't know, but we're willing to try. And that's when we go into face it. Now we're ready to face it, right? Now we know what we don't know. We're starting to model what we're seeing because we think it's better than what we know. And then we have to face it.
there, there's a shift that occurs, and you can see this in children when it happens. And you go, okay, faking it. And it's like, well, they're trying. Boy, they are doers. Oh my goodness. They're not afraid to fall down. And I go, and they're in that transition from faking it to facing
Right.
it. And the difference is that when they go from I don't know, but I'm intrigued, but I'll watch someone else do it, to I can do
Right.
this. I can do this, and I'm going to keep going at it. And there's no quit. There's no quit. Like they'll roll over, they may get frustrated, and then they'll get up and they'll grab something. Or you'll see these kids that do this, and they stick their hands up and they're like going, yes, please go ahead and just hold on to me and let's move forward and let's make this happen. It's like, huh, that's pretty cool.
You know what you just reminded me of? You just gave me, I just had this epiphany. It's in that moment we get that first taste of freedom.
Yes.
Like that literally, because we no longer need someone to carry us to get somewhere. You know,
Right.
we could catch up to the people walking around us. It's almost like that's the first taste of freedom. And maybe with crawling's our first taste of freedom. And then there's the walking. So Chuck is obviously having a little bit of technical difficulties. So, and after that, it is understanding after that taste of freedom, it's almost like now, okay, I can have this. Now what else can I have? What else can I
Absolutely.
taste?
Yeah. And that hunger, like you said, it's like we get so inspired by the fact it's like what, ooh, ooh, I'm not holding on to anything. Ooh, I took a couple steps. Ooh, this feels different. And you're doing the wobble and without the music. And it's like, okay, how did this all happen?
Right.
And it's that self-awareness. And it's really, this is kind of the bastion of moving from facing it till you make it till you get to that point that you believe till you achieve. It's like, okay, because I can faith it. And I got faith that I'm standing up again. I got faith that I'm moving forward. I got faith that, wow, I actually feel this in my body. And then when I lean forward a little bit, I go faster. Ho, 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 ho. And when I lift my knees and my little feet, I can hear the pitter patter. And I go, oh, I'm moving now, man. Doesn't mean I can stop, but boy, that's what the walls are for, right? That's what the walls and all the bumpers that mom and dad put up and all the security gates, because we have to have a framework that shows us that there are obstacles, there are things in the way from us. Because when does a kid want to stop running?
When they
They don't.
when they sleep.
Yeah, well, yeah, when they get exhausted and they hit the wall, metaphorically and physically and energetically. And this is what helps us grow as people, is that we start to learn that these metaphorical walls, that these literal walls, that these limitations and boundaries, that we all go through this very similar process. We can even advance it to something like mathematics. Well, 1 plus 1 equals 2, unless you're putting it in a much more expanded mathematical equation. And I go, so at the beginning, you don't know what these things mean. You're learning numbers, you're learning letters, and all of a sudden you're like going, okay, so we're faking it. Repeat after me. 1, 1. Okay, write a 1. So if I give you 1 and we add 1, it equals what? And you go, 11. No, 2. And it's like, oh. And then we start to face it, because now what do? They go, okay, that was 1 plus 1. Now what's 1 plus 2? And then 3. And you start to learn this system. Well, it's no different than walking or a song or lyrics or how to kick a soccer ball or how to emote your voice or how to be in a relationship. We go through these exact same processes, irrespective of how simple or how advanced the learning may be.
Yeah, I think we get caught though when we get so comfortable in modeling others that we want to take on their persona and
Yes.
who they are, because we think that we're not good enough but we see the accolades and the achievements that this person gets. And so we try to be them and we forget who we are. And
Yes.
then we go into this imposter syndrome that you were referring to, which we actually did a show on also weeks ago. And it's that constant faking it to make it. But I'm going to tell you, I think even for me, it's the saying that I grew up hearing, fake it till you make it, fake it till you make it. And
Yes.
how do you know when you really made it if you're so busy faking it?
That's a great question. I was just watching last night, of all things, a documentary on George Michael.
Oh, yeah, I saw it.
Oh, it's
Mhm,
brilliant. I mean, it's
mhm.
brilliant. And to see how his music uncovered,
Yeah.
and covered his whole life. And I don't know why that came to my head and heart when you asked me that question, but it did, because I was like going, he was faking it till he made it, because his outcome was to be a superstar.
Mhm.
And then he got it and found how empty it
Right.
was. And to your point, this is the challenge with imposter syndrome, is that it sets up such a high yield of imposter living that there's no fulfillment. That this idea of what success looks like and feels like
Mhm.
doesn't fill us
Because
up.
I think that it's the illusion versus the vision, right? It's
Ah,
we think it's a vision that's going to fulfill that purpose. Like you and I know, like
yes.
if your why doesn't make you cry, it's not your why, like the fuel behind what you do. And I think that we get jaded by not realizing that an illusion of what we think we want is not really what we want. It's not the vision that we had. And I think going back to what you were saying about George Michael is that he misconstrued his vision for an illusion. And the fuel behind it did not
Mm,
fulfill when he got to the top. And I see that with a lot of artists. I see that with a lot of um celebrities, if you would. It's, we
yes.
hear that, money makes you happy, money makes you happy. No, money definitely aids in the happiness, don't get me wrong. And
Sure.
it's not the make all break all. I mean, there's times that I had no money and I could say that there was moments I was absolutely happy. And
Yes.
there's moments that I've had money where I could tell you I was absolutely sad. And so
Absolutely.
it's not money is a tool. Here's what I
It
like
is.
that fueled it, if you would. It's knowing the why behind it. What did I achieve in the moment of
Yeah.
making that money? Or what did I achieve in myself personally? Where did I grow? And how did I keep the hunger alive to fulfill what my vision is? Like my vision is so big, I'm constantly hungry for more. I'm constantly
Yeah.
looking at where can I touch another life to help bring that bond between the parent and the child, the understanding, how can I turn the misunderstanding into understanding on both sides? And then I have to look at my own family and I was like, oh, okay, I was not the parent whisperer again today. Sorry about that. And I was like, okay, where's my disconnect coming in? And you and I had this
Sure.
conversation. I was like, gosh, sometimes I feel like that imposter. And you're like, yeah, me too. And we have to
Absolutely.
realize that it's not really the imposter, just sometimes we have our own blinders. We can't see our own dysfunction, if you would, that's right in front of us, that it takes that friend that we have to say, hey, look, can I just tell you what I see? And it's like, huh, you know, yeah, I see
Yes.
it when you allow me to see it because I can't see it to myself. And so again, it goes back to fulfilling that purpose, fulfilling that vision versus the illusion of what the vision is.
Yes. No, I love that, and it really is true. It's one of the reasons why you are the company you keep becomes such an important facet, and having real people around you. There's a difference between people who placate, and then there's this other side, which is the empowerment. When we have people who are enablers, who are just saying yes to the narrative rather than just being truthful, and say, hey, this is really what I see. And when people are successful, there is a tendency to have a network of cronies that say yes to everything. Why? Because who's the person paying the bill? Who's the person with the entourage? Who's the person who's, the popular one who is at the show or speaking on stage or writing a book or having a show?
It's
Whatever
the
it is. I
illusion.
go, it is. It's an absolute illusion. You bring up a great point, which is when it shifts to reality and when it aligns with our value system, which is what are those emotions and feelings that we value the highest, that continuity, that clarity. And people go, oh, I value money the most. And I go, well, then I can invariably guarantee you if money is your maker, then you're going to have a challenging life.
Right.
If magical moments is your maker, you are going to be feeling much more inspired, much more enthused, much more engaged, and in a way that is substantive, where if you took the money away, you'd still be happy. And if you add money to it, you'd still be happy. So it's like, wow, okay. That's how we know.
And just to piggyback off what you're saying, when I work with people that have that same, because I also, as you know, work with several adults that, are looking for their self-worth, that looking for their self-esteem. And when we look at, oh, well, I need money. Do you need money, or what do you need money for? What is money going to bring you?
Right.
That's when we start getting into what they really, really want. And it's that the happiness or the travel or whatever. I'm going to tell you, there's tons of people that travel that are not millionaires. Tons of people that
Absolutely.
can find a good vacation. And it's like, one person I was like, well, what if you became like a airline assistant, right? Oh, I didn't even think about that. You could travel all the time. You
Sure.
get paid for it.
Absolutely. Well, and to your point, Vinu, and this is really imperative for people to understand, what's first class to someone? For some people, flying on an airplane for the first time is first class. For some people, being on a train, a bus, some form of transport. For some people, being in a motorized vehicle for the first time is first class. And I go, okay, that's remarkable. How would it feel to have that experience? And at times, I often think about this and I go, is it lost on us that when you're flying at 35,000 feet in a pressurized aluminum can at 400, 500 miles an hour, in between continents, able to watch movies, communicate, use the facilities, ask for beverages, eat, sleep? What a modern marvel that for creatures who are not physically adept at flying on their own, that we can have this experience.
Right.
What are we complaining about?
Right.
I mean, like, seriously.
No elbow room.
Well, well, come on. We have to have our standards, girl. Come on now. No, but all joking aside, it really is one of those scenarios that when we trade all the expectation, and that's really what we're talking about today, is that faking it, facing it, and faithing it are really just components of believing. Believing that we're worth it.
Yes.
Because if you really believe that you're worth it, you don't care if you're faking it. You don't. Why? Because you're being and doing the best that you can in the moment with the resources that you have. But if you fake it long enough, you're going to start realizing that you have tenacity and drive and hunger, and that's what allows you to face it. And then when you move past just the facing it, you get to that point where you're like, going, man, I'm actually learning something. I'm actually feeling something. Am I developing muscles? Am I developing some skill? And now we have this faith that maybe the divine universe gave us some opportunities if we're open to it.
Yes.
And this brings us to the next level, which is believing till you achieve. Believe till you achieve.
See, I think when you say faith it, like if you're just spending a moment with that, it's going through the development of the faking it to make it, to face it, to face what's coming on, to having faith of knowing that everything's going to work out the way it's supposed to work out. And maybe not the way
Yeah.
that you want it to work out, but the way that it's supposed to unfold for you to get where you want to go in the future. And you know, I'm excited to say that my 50th birthday is coming up this year. And thank you. I mean, I celebrate that too. People are like, you mean 25? And I'm like, no, 50, absolutely 50. And I celebrate that because I had that epiphany years ago, is how many people don't make it to 50.
Right.
And there was a time in my past that I probably wouldn't have made it to 50 if I didn't find a new path. And I didn't know why I was
Mm.
on that path. I didn't know why my path pivoted to personal growth, because I didn't even know that was such a thing, by the way, until I went to a seminar in 2007. I don't know what, because that's not where I was going, by the way. And you know that because you know my past. And yet I had faith. I had faith
Hmm.
that, for my belief, knowing that God above has always directed me in my life, that I'm just going to have faith that this is the right path to go on. And literally, that's why I'm here today with you, getting ready to celebrate 50 years on this planet, and looking at all the accomplishments that I've managed to achieve. Um, and you say believe until you achieve. And sometimes I didn't even know how to believe, so I borrowed somebody else's belief. And
Yes.
one of
Yes.
our great friends, Lauren Lahav, I will always give her credit for seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself at that moment. And, choosing life instead of choosing an exit plan, and being able to get there today because of the faith.
Hmm.
I went through faking it to make it. Oh, I did. And that's when she believed in me when I couldn't. Then I had to face it. And then finally I had to faith it. And it changed the belief that I had to show me the ability I created in myself and what I wanted in order
Yes.
to achieve it.
That facing it and getting the lessons, getting tempered. The faithing it is really the transition when we start to understand that we're worth it. And by being our best, we'll do our best at whatever we can be at the moment.
And that you're saying that I still live by the way, is you can live your best, but it doesn't mean you're being your best. But when you are being your best, you're definitely living your best. And it just rings so true in this moment.
And it's such a simple facet. And yet, it is one of the most bewildering things because today's environment, and you and I've had so many discussions online, offline about this, where in the world today, there's such a need for people to feel like they belong,
Yes.
like that they're actually part of something, that they feel like that they're inclusive, and that they deserve to be a part of this crazy race, which is the human race.
And they bring
So it's
value,
not
right? They bring value to it. That they're looking for, where do I add value?
and how do people value me?
Yes.
And this is where it gets a little bit sorted, is that people oftentimes are trying to find the self-value in them,
Hmm.
like, and that appreciation, that love, that connection, and going, okay, I do have these skills. Oh, I am humorous. Oh, I am kind. I am loving soul. And not making it where I have to be affirmed by someone else.
Yes.
And this is where we start to slide back into facing it. Because if you're not getting the feedback that you feel you deserve, then you're looking for something else. And I go, okay, why? Why are you sliding back to faking it
Right.
when you know that faithing it is gonna get you there? And they go, but will it really? And I love what Jessica Din says. She goes, yeah, people look for validation from others. We do.
Because we don't know our own worth. We're waiting for someone else to see our worth in us so we can see our worth in us. And that's really what it comes down to, that tribe. we are looking for that tribe to say, hey, you're welcome here. We want you. You're invited. Whether you can make it or not, you're invited. That the moment I was invited to something, I was just dumbfounded. I'm like, what? I was invited? Like, oh my
Yes.
gosh. And I didn't even want to go, but I went anyway just to fulfill the need of wanting to be wanted because all of a
Oh,
sudden I had a piece of value. Somebody
yes.
valued me enough to say, I want her here.
And there's this occurrence that happens, and the conditioning starts early. It starts early when you go to school and they say, "Okay, here's the new student. Everyone say hi." And it's like, "Oh, they like me." No, they said hi because the teacher told them to say hi. And then we're like going, oh, so we're looking for this external validation. Why? Well, hey, let's give them a round of applause. Hey, it's almost like when you see the old TV shows and the crowd and they hold up the applause sign. It's like, well, were they really going to laugh? Well, no, they were told to laugh. And it's like, ah, so there's cues. And I go, oh, wow. We have been conditioned to have cues for the timing of different things that occur. And when someone acts outside of that, that's called disruption. That's called that they are a mismatcher. That is, and I'm like going, that's none of that's true. Said the fact of the matter is, there's this different set of conditions that go with that. And so someone said, well, give me an example. I'm confused. I said, great, a funeral. And they go, oh, that shouldn't be a celebration. That's somber. You should be in pain. You should be, well, and I go, well, apparently you've never been to a Japanese funeral because it's a celebration of life.
Right.
In fact, it's celebrated the same way that a new birth is, or the building of a house. They make mochi and they're having music and sake is flowing. And it's like going, wow, it's a party up in here. Why? Because they're celebrating the fact that this person lived,
Right. And that's like,
not that they're gone.
that's what I use. Like I use that example all the time when I tell people nothing has a meaning but the meaning you give it. And
Yes.
people are like, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, think of a funeral. Like my husband, yes, I mean, he'll cry when someone dies because what you're mourning is the memories of the fact that you can't reach out and touch someone anymore, right? Like they're gone.
Right.
And yet he looks at, like, we talked about this when we were first dating, over 12 years ago. And he's like, I look at death as a celebration of life. We celebrate what they brought to this earth, what they've given you, the opportunity you had to connect, the growth you got from them, and we celebrate they've gone through the cycle of life. And I was like, huh, because I never really thought about death that way. You know,
Right.
I just looked at like
Well,
selfishly, like, oh, I'm never going to see my grandfather again, and oh my gosh, and I didn't get enough time, and me. And it was a different perspective. And I said, so when I heard that nothing has a meaning but the meaning you give it, I thought to myself, this is a great example. And then it changed my
absolutely.
perception about death. Not, I mean, I still get up teary eyed about it, but I don't hang on to it. And then I could start to see like all the greatness I got from that person and how they touched my life and how parts of what I've learned will live through me. And then I get to pass it on to someone else.
Yes. That's the legacy.
Yep.
And the illusion is that someone's gone or that we've lost something. I said, wow, you gained experience and interaction. And I'll take it even a step further. There are times when people have had tons of time and they took it all for granted.
Yeah.
And you're like going, wow, wow, really? And then there are other times you met someone just maybe a couple times, but had deep engagement with them. And it's like going, in fact, I remember very vividly a person I met one time, and they had such a profound impact on me. And when I learned of their passing, it was like, oh my gosh. And what was I missing? And I said, I was actually missing the fact that I wouldn't have another conversation with them.
Well,
I was actually missing the fact that it's like, wow, that was so inspirational. I wonder how it could have been. And I go, but I also live with the gratitude of knowing I had that one time.
well, I look at like people that have passed that have just touched my life that I never met, like when Michael Jackson,
Sure.
I mean, flood of memories came to me.
Yes.
And, when George Michael passed, flood of memories came to me. David Bowie, like all these Prince, you know?
Yeah.
And I've never met these people
Right.
at all. I mean, I wish I would, but I
Yet,
didn't.
yet you did, because you met them through their music. You met them through their inspiration. You met them through those anchors that they set for you. And that was the whole thing. I mean, again, go back to that George Michael expose. It was like, holy smokes.
Right.
Like, I just thought it was cool that he was burning his faith jacket. And it's like, nope. There was a reason why he was doing that. And the imagery and the simplicity of the messaging. And I go, I remember things that were happening in my life at all these different times. Same thing with Michael Jackson and Robin Williams. And there were just people you go, dang.
How'd they touched you?
Oh, that Chris Farley just made you laugh. Someone who could be so self-deprecating and yet find the humor in it, like Kathy Buckley says. Like taking somebody, he took his weight and just made it hilarious and without hesitation. I mean, with Patrick Swayze as a Chippendale dancer, come on SNL, really, dude, and or big guy in a little guy coat with David Spade, and you're like going, wow. And they go, okay, why were you a big guy? And they said, no,
But
I was inspired by the humor.
But and then tying it just back into like what we're talking about tonight, it's you look at all these people, and when you really get to know them, there were so many illusions
Oh,
that they had and that we have as listeners, or the experience that we had through their music or through their, acting. And then you find out who they really are. And
yes.
you realize that there was we aspired to be them, right? Like we aspired to dance like them. Like I can't tell you how many times I wanted to dance like Madonna back in the 80s, right? And we faked it to make it. Definitely did
Yeah.
that, with my little Madonna gloves and bracelets and big hair. Still never learned how to sing like her though. But my point is that they too had their challenges. And if we can just help our listeners realize the phase of life that they're in, we're not saying faking it's bad, but staying there and not realizing who you are authentically to face it and to faith it, to finally to believe it, to achieve it.
Well, and that's where the imposter syndrome kicks in.
Right.
When we're constantly living in a state of other rather than us.
Mm.
And it's like, well, what do you mean other, Chuck? It's like, oh, it's real simple. You are not living to meet your need. You're living to meet a desire to appease others because you believe it'll bring you the connection that you so want to feel. And this is where that disconnect happens for so many people. They have this deep-seated desire to feel wanted, needed, trusted, valued, to exactly what you were saying earlier, my dear friend. And on the flip side of that, they're like going, but if just someone would recognize me, listen to me. And when I heard how that documentary with George Michael opened up, and he says his full name, and it's like this Greek name, Georgophonis, something. I was like, oh, wait, what? And then he goes, yes, the name that you will never know.
Mm.
And it was like, whoa. That was an epiphany. And then finding out that his father was Greek, and his mother was English, and that all these things that were going on in his world, and that identity crisis. But and we've heard this term said by many other people before, I created this person. He created a superstar.
Right.
He created this person that was going to be able to elevate. And there's a reason why he couldn't take Andrew Ridgeley with him. Because he had already had this persona that as a star, you're not a star together. You're a star because it's singular.
Right.
Not the group is the star. If it was Queen or Freddie Mercury, who had his moment. If it was Mick Jagger, it's like in the Stones. I go, that's different. But it was George Michael, Wham, and Andrew Ridgeley. And then all of a sudden it was like George.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because he had the star vision. He was the driver, the striver. He's the one that was willing to do it all simultaneously. Fake it, face it, and faith it. Because when did they broke in 83 and then he actually went solo in 85? 2 years later.
Right.
I'm like going, dang. That's meteoric rise. That's meteoric rise. And to your point, wasn't it interesting that he wasn't making any money? They weren't making any money, even when they were making all these records. And so people go, oh, but you're rich. And they're like, no, we're not.
Again, an illusion.
Yeah, we're two really popular broke guys that are on a stipend and sponsored by Fila. So why is this so important? And it is really important to understand that belief comes when we accept who we are.
Yes. All parts of us, by the way.
That's the good, the bad, and the ugly, as they would say.
Right, right. And I mean, I think that, people, this is where authenticity comes in, where it's part of owning your greatness is owning all the different things that show up for you,
Yes.
and to recognize when they show up for you. For me personally, my ugly comes out when I feel rushed or stressed or, because I'm a high C on the disc, when things start to not go as planned. And there's also learned behavior too, to get the flexibility, to go from
Yes.
rigid to flexibility, because I realized that that was not serving me to stay in a place of rigidness, and it has to be this way. And so going through many, many scrapes and bruises with that, it was a learned flexibility. It was,
Yeah.
things are still going to be okay if they're not done exactly as come to plan. As a matter of fact, I have found fun in not making so many plans.
Love that.
Because it was finding the joy. And that's what I feel the antidote is, when you find those different places of where you are at in your life, of when you get to that stress point or anger or frustration, and when you learn how to bring the joy back into it.
That's beautiful, Venu. And I'm reminded of the fact that as a high C, it's what are we measuring?
Right.
Because it's like it's like, wait, the stuff that I can't control is what's perturbing me, and all the stuff I can that I haven't really even looked at. And it's like, wait, what? Like, well, are you happy most of the time? Well, yeah. Do you love your family? Oh, yes. You love yourself? Yes. You in shape? Yes. Oh, okay. I'm a little confused then,
Right.
because for all the stuff that when we discuss and have deep conversations that is so important to us, I'm like going, well, does that have some bearing? Can we put that into the C category of, computative, and that we need certainty because we're looking at all the computer aspects of all the knowledge and information? I go, because that's what's going to fill us up, the real stuff. And I go, oh, cool. Yet there's this part of us that goes, if you're successful in business, because we hear the statistics all the time, most businesses fail within the first 2 years. If you've been in business for 10 years, oh my gosh, you're a success story beyond measure. And it's like going, interesting. And yet there's businesses that have been in business for over 100 years.
Right.
Yeah. How do they do it? They go, well, they have a system, but they believe. They believe that they're the best. They believe that they deserve this. They believe that this is their birthright. They believe that creating value. And I go, wow, beliefs become real important, don't they? And I go, I believe so.
It's one of the biggest things about branding.
Oh, definitely. People that work for Apple, as an example, love Apple. And I'm not like going, yeah, Apple's okay. Yeah, it's a job. No, they freaking love Apple. They have this whole ideology. Why? Because it's part of their culture.
It is.
And I go, and they go, but how about people who leave Apple? I said, not so much.
Right. But there's also faith that comes with it too, like that whole faith, right? And the faith that they have in the company and the brand, because it
Yes.
rings true. there's an alignment with the truth. And I think that that's what people find when they get to that faith it point, right? Fake it, face it, faith it. When you get to that faith it point, you found the trust in
Yes.
between whatever you're reaching for and your ability to go forward through to it.
One of the things that just kind of dawned on me was beliefs are formulated from having faith and really understanding your required values that you need to meet.
Mm,
And people go, what do you mean the required values? Well, there are adopted values that people look at and go, oh, it would be nice to be humorous and maybe a little bit more free flowing. And I go, okay, that'd be lovely. Is that your nature? No, I'm more calculated. I'm more logistical. And I go, what's wrong with that? Well, nothing, I guess. But shouldn't I aspire to be more like other people who are have more freedom? And I go, do you feel free when you're on task? And they go, yes, I actually feel guided. I feel really good and safe when I have structure. And I go, then what would loosey goosey feel like to you? And they go, oh, that might be too much variety. And I go, then why would you go against your nature?
right.
Why are you making something wrong that's an adopted belief system because that works for someone else? And I go, you're not them.
Well, I think it goes back to what Jessica was saying in the comments about people looking for validation from others, is that if you're not getting the
Yes.
validation from others with the choice that you make, all of a sudden it's no longer the right choice to make. You need to change your choice because we seek out as humans to have someone to collude with to say, oh, yes, you're right. Because if you're wrong, then you got to, then something's wrong. You got to change it.
Oh, this is going to be the topic of another conversation because I'm telling you now, that desire to collude, to have collaboration, to connect, doesn't mean it's a relationship. Doesn't mean it's a deeply seated connection. It means that in the moment, through an action, or I will say even a momentary belief, that we go, oh, you see it too, right? And now all of a sudden you're soulmates, you're BFS forever because you happen to see something in a moment. That may or may not have been a belief, but an interest,
Right.
something where it was an observation. I go, huh, are our standards so low? And this is where I'm reminded most environments that are propagated in the world of personal development and self help are created out of like-mindedness where people are aligning because they think they know what they need.
Sure. That's what brings the comfort into the uncomfortable, you
Absolutely.
know?
And then when they get in a peer group, they start to understand that we might be seeing the same things in slightly different ways, and that may not align with my values. And so we may be like-minded, but not like-hearted.
Well, it was funny that you say this because I was just talking to a client today, and I'll say, one of the things that I want to get better at is being in a room where I know no one and being comfortable to talk to someone. He's like, "Oh, that's so fun." I said, "Really? It's fun for you because that's one of the things we're working on is socialization." And he's like, "It's so fun." I said, "Well, tell me more." And he's like, "Well, when I know someone and then once I talk to them, then I could talk to other people." And I said, "I get that, but I'm talking about when you know no one." And he's like, "Oh." I said, "Yeah. It's because if you know someone, if I go to a party and I know no one, but I know you, Chuck, I can walk in there, confidence, trusting myself, feeling myself because I know you, I'll talk. And then all of a sudden, I'll feel comfortable enough to start going out and talking to other people. It's a different feeling when you know no one, there's no connection, and you got to go and create it and hope and pray that someone's going to align with you somehow, some way on a thought or a moment.
Oh, yes. The answer is yes. And I've been that guy. I've been that guy walking into a space and not knowing a soul, like legit not knowing a soul. And then having that moment where you're like, oh, should I even be here?
Right.
Like, what am I doing here? And it's like, and I know it's going to sound really like silly, but I go, do I deserve to be here?
Right.
Because what are we looking at? I go, oh, well, this guy drove up in a Lambo. This guy drove up in a Bentley. Okay. I mean, I've got what I think is a nice car, but it's not in this range. And this guy's wearing Armani, and this guy's wearing Cerruti, and I'm like wearing, okay, this is like a Men's Warehouse suit.
Right.
Like, what the frick? And everything they have is Gucci and Prada and Louis, and I'm like going, okay, mine's Fui or Fomani, or it's like going, what the frick is going on? And then it dawned on me. The only time I've ever felt marginalized or less than is when I started comparing and not believing or having faith that I put my pants on one leg at a time, just like these folks do.
Mm-hmm.
That I draw breath and the universe saw fit to have me wake up this morning and give me heartbeat and the love of my life next to me and my beautiful children and my gorgeous, adorable friends like you that are intellectual and just so engaging. And I go, I'm blessed.
Yeah.
And as long as I remember I'm blessed, then I belong anywhere I freaking am. Because now you're a gift and you're gracing the space with the one commodity you truly own, which is you.
I was with Joseph this past week, and he was saying about confidence, like the root word of confidence is confide. And I was like,
Yes.
oh my gosh, confide. Well, what would it take for me to confide? Trust,
Yes.
competence, grace. And I was like, wow, that's really when you have confidence in yourself, you trust yourself, you have grace, you have competence in what you're talking about or getting ready to talk about. That's what brings the confidence. And I was like, it was such an epiphany to think of it that way. Right.
It's literally you believe till you
Right.
achieve. Like it's literally that's it. And the thing I know this to my core. When you believe and you be your best, even if you tried not to do your best, you can't help but do your best
Right.
because you are being who you are. And I go, that's never broken. It's never marginalized. It's never negative. So why would I judge it? They go, oh, well, compared to others. And I say, there we go back to the social conditioning. What rank are you in school? What did you graduate the top of your class? How do you rank in life? How do you, it's like, oh, my goodness gracious. So what if I asked a deeper question, said, do you love yourself? Do you love others? Are you a kind person? Dang, it's like you're pretty successful to me. Simple,
And
but it doesn't require any commas and zeros. Doesn't require any more time. It just requires actually doing what you just said, my dear sister, and that is confiding, being open, honest, authentic, and real.
yeah. And it will lead you through that cycle of the fake it, face it, and faith it to finally to a believing to achieving, because we're all capable of that. We just have to, I mean, I love the fact that I grew up thinking fake it to make it, because I would never have known to look for the right role models of who's already doing what I want. Who can I aspire to look up to, not be? And that was the difference. That was the
Exactly.
difference, is when I really got to know myself, to realize I don't want to be them anymore. I don't want to
And
be like them anymore. But what I
no,
want is to aspire people the way they have, in my
yes.
own way of doing it.
And you don't want to because you don't need to.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're amazing.
And that's what we want to leave all you listeners with, is just knowing, see your own greatness. Because here's one thing that Les Brown told me last week. He says, we all are born with our greatness. We have
Mm-hmm.
just been trained to fail. I mean, we have.
Couldn't agree more.
We've been trained to fail and not see it.
Yes.
And so now it's time that we start to see it again. It's been a pleasure, my friend, my brother from another mother. Thank you for joining the conversation tonight. This show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglishworld.ca for all your news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it.